Hello, welcome. Happy Wednesday, I believe. Thanks for everyone for coming out and being with us here virtually today. My name is Zach. I work with Collaborative Partners as our Director of Operations, and I also do quite a lot of work one-to-one with our clients, either in like what we're going to talk about today, helping them develop scopes of work or evaluating their projects and plans, or working with them on post-award compliance and capacity. So I do a little of everything. I'll go ahead and bounce this over to my co-facilitator, Dr. Angela Silva.
Hey, Zach, thanks everyone. Glad you're able to join us today. I hope you're getting a lunch or having something amazing in your desk as we kind of go over these topics today. And we'll get to hear from each of you as we dive into introductions. And like Zach said, this will be recorded and be emailed out for folks that weren't able to attend or want a little bit of a refresher on what we reviewed. We do have a small group today, so please ask your questions. Trying to synthesize a lot of information into a scope of work or trying to track how your project's going can be often difficult and overwhelming. So we do want to hear from you on maybe some situations you've experienced or questions you have as we go through this session. So thank you.
All right, so today's agenda, just a brief overview here. We're going to be looking at what the capacity building project is. I'm sure some of you might be tired of hearing what it is all about, but we'll keep talking about it just to kind of refocus and continue to explain. We'll do a little let's get to know you. Like we said, it's a small group, so that's session we won't take too long on. We'll dive into scopes of work, what they are, things to keep in mind when you're developing them, evaluation plans, and tracking data. Then we'll give a little plug for our next session, some free resources available to you, and we'll cap it all off with some questions, acknowledgement, closing. We have about an hour 20 left in the session. So as Angela mentioned, it is kind of a small group today, so we have plenty of availability for questions and time, and feel free to raise your hand or come off mute, and we have people monitoring the chat and the participation, so we're happy to jump in. With that, let's go ahead and get in. So the Tacoma Capacity Building Project, this project overall is put on by the neighborhood, the Neighborhood and Community Services Department. We partner with them with the overall goal of providing training assistance to nonprofit organizations operating or hoping to provide services throughout the city of Tacoma. The primary focus is to strengthen Black, Indigenous, and people of color organizations, newly funded organizations, and a select number of cultural organizations, primarily focused on the arts, culture, sciences, with a mission to provide accessible programming and or youth programs in the city of Tacoma. We're very excited to be doing this. We've loved our first 3 months. We've made it the first 3 months of the year. The programming will continue on the rest of the year. We'll also have opportunities besides the group settings, the workshops, also continuing to offer technical assistance, one-to-one review technical assistance. Just a quick plug, and I'll do it again at the end. We open slots for 30-minute one-to-one sessions every first, second, and third Thursday of the month throughout the year. So those are on our Calendly site. Like I said, we'll put some links and things in the chat here, shortly by the end. But feel free to sign up. Those 30-minute intro sessions, all of this is free to you. They're just consultations, and go ahead and talk to us about maybe challenges or pain points your organization is experiencing, and we can make sure you're connected to the best resources and make sure we're getting training assistance to you as direct as possible. So like I said, we'll put more in the chat here by the end, but just throwing that out for you to be thinking about now.
And just a shout out to Tacoma Creates as well, another agency with the city of Tacoma that is sponsoring capacity building support. So thank you for that and engaging arts organizations.
So scopes of work. So starting with, what is the scope of work? The scope of work is generally it's part of a larger statement of work document. And it's used to create an understanding of like what the project does and doesn't cover. The document's going to discuss your project's needs, describe how the goals are met. It'll outline what work is going to be performed. It includes deliverables, timelines, milestones, budget, reporting requirements. All of that in the world of, project and service-based grants, as you're all probably aware, the statement of work itself could be part of a larger document, either a service contract, or some of it would be outlined in the RFP or RFQ. And so the actual specific scope of work is going to be a portion of that document that you, as you're planning your proposal and as you get to prospective awarding, you're going to be drafting and kind of putting to pen and paper, getting it in that statement of work. Excuse me, so that you can all agree on what work you're going to be doing, and it'll help keep you on track as well as keep the funder aware of what to expect. Typically, you'll work with the funder to develop the specific scope of work as it relates to your proposal, and then that's all part of your contracting. So how can it be helpful? Why is it necessary? So the scope of work in project planning more generally is a really foundational document to help any project run smoothly. It's going to help your team and funders agree on what the requirements are, identify potential risks, and ensure successful and timely completion. For example, when you're drafting your scope of work, you may notice that your scheduled task conflicts with some other task or some other deliverable. You're going to make changes to your timelines and your budget or your personnel and resourcing to adjust accordingly. You'll be able to help align your team with your project deliverables, achieve your goals, make your deadlines, avoid delays, and as everyone wants, prevent any added or increased costs. With your scopes of work, just like in when we talk about like overall strategic planning or budget development, you want to keep your goals smart, specific, measurable, achievable, and time bound. These will help you as you draft good pieces of your scope of work, good deliverables, good milestones that you and the funder or anybody reading that document are going to be able to look at and say, okay, I know exactly what we're getting out of this, how long it's going to take, and it helps you stay on track. In developing your scope of work, you want to be specific. You want to use clear, precise language to help avoid communications, and listing all deliverables, milestone tasks. You want to avoid as much confusion about the project as it progresses. Some examples here, we have something that might need improvement. Writing about, for example, this is writing a deliverable within a scope of work, right? So a task might be to assess the need for financial literacy, and your deliverable is that you'll write a curriculum to address the needs. If we go back to thinking about making, smart things, it's specific to like the overall of what you want to do. You want to assess financial literacy, but it doesn't really explain how it's going to be measurable. It doesn't really explain what the timeline is on this. It's hard to say how you're going to assess whether or not this has gone well. Whereas in maybe a slightly better written version, your task is that you're going to administrate and evaluate a survey. So you're going to survey a specific number of groups. In this case, it's 4 groups of 20 members, and the survey is going to contain topics related to financial literacy, independence, self-assessed comfort with the topics. Each cohort is going to be administered a certain number of questions, in this case 25, and you're going to have somebody who's going to review the data and review that. The deliverable on that is a very specified 10-hour curriculum for 20-person cohorts to address challenges that would be completed over 6 months. So now you have a time binding on it. We know exactly how many questions are going to be. We know how we're going to assess this. We know what resources are required to administrate 4 surveys, right? So this is a better way when you're thinking about writing out your scopes, both within your contracting as well as from a more holistic project planning sense. You want to keep your projects, specific and measurable throughout the stages. Another thing to keep in mind when you're developing your scopes of work is making sure to collaborate. We want to plan ahead. Even the best plans can change, things can come up. A scope of work is a kind of a piece of your plan, and it may need changes, adjustments along the way. So you'll want to, as you're developing your scopes of work, as you're developing your proposals that will become your scopes of work, you want to work together as a team, working with your collaborators or partners. So you bring a sense of unity, alignment, and shared vision to the project. If any of you were here for one of our earlier topics, we talked about creating that shared vision so that everyone's going in the same way. So when stumbling blocks do come up, they're more easy to overcome. And this is the same idea. You want to be bringing everyone into the project so that eventually you can succeed no matter what comes up. When you're working as a partner with your funder and engaging in regular communication, it's going to be a great way to minimize any of that miscommunication or uneven expectations early on in your project. Like we said, with maybe the kind of the poor example in the first task, right? You and your funder may agree that you need a financial literacy evaluation, but they might think that's a very different item than what you're considering. So being specific, engaging with them, working together is going to be a great way to set yourself up for success. It's a nice thing to remember, just like all of us. Funders also just want grants to be easy. Yes, there's maybe some it can be hard getting grants, and planning for them and administrating them well, but everyone wants these to go easy. Everyone wants to just have their scope of work, receive their cash, and go back and forth, right? So working together to make sure your scope is mutually agreeable, well defined, and that you have the capacity to manage it is going to be a great way to start your project. So what are some of the elements of a scope of work? Now, not every scope of work is going to look exactly the same. Some of the items may even be combined, but generally a scope of work is going to have all these sections in some manner. You're going to have your deliverables, so it's going to cover all the specific services of your project. Those might not be specific. For example, a 10-hour curriculum, right? They might be a certain number of people served, or outcomes around. I know some of the groups we work with work in housing and rehabilitation. So maybe it's a certain number of people transitioning into permanent housing, or leaving temporary housing, or coming into temporary housing. Like, there's a lot of ways those deliverables might look. There's different ways you can write those requirements, but you're going to have something that's going to tell you what you're doing. You'll have a timeline. For, like in our case, in our scope of work, we have a timeline on how often and how many of these trainings we're going to be putting out across the year, right? Your scope of work might be something a little different. Like it could be, we've seen it as general as a certain number of people served by a certain date, 3 months, 4 months, 1 year, check-in. But some amount of timeline and expectations will be in there. Your scope of work may include milestones. Parts of your project, phases of your project, breaking them up into little pieces and sticking to your timeline. Especially if we've seen scopes of work that include something like, after 1/3 of your work is complete, you might get a certain drawdown, or a certain, part of your payments is tied to this milestone, right? Reporting is a big one. You'll always have sections related to any reports that you need to generate. That section, much like the payment information section that we're about to kind of go over, may not be directly in the scope of work. It may be in the broader statement of work, or broader contract, or in the RFP that'll outline what sort of reporting requirements are needed. And all of this comes back into kind of our overall topic of capacity, just understanding that as you're writing these, each little piece is another body of work, another body of time. So as you're agreeing to or writing in the reporting requirements, make sure that you are thinking through and collaborating with your partners to know how much time, how much effort, how much resources all this reporting going to take. Especially as we work with city or county or state governments, the reporting usually becomes a little bit more intensive. And then of course your payment information. As I said, that might be included somewhere else, but it include, the timing, the rates, contract totals, other information to understand how and when and why you'll get paid and how the money will flow. So looking at just a quick review of some sample scopes here. So this is for Organization A, their technical and capacity building project. This is a scope of work generated on behalf of like a subcontractor. So you agree to work together on a specific series of tasks for a specific period of time with a specific amount of pay, and then everyone signs and agrees to these items. So in this case, thinking about our SMART goals, we clearly define, you'll provide 2 workshops, you'll provide one-on-one technical assistance, and you'll contribute to like a toolkit, a deliverable. This is going to happen between March 1st and March 19th of 2023. And then your compensation is listed very, very specifically on you get paid a certain amount of money for this certain area of work, and everyone signs off on this. When you're working on this probably more than likely won't look like what your scope of work looks like on like behalf of a funder, but when you are developing like larger projects, this might be what your MOU should look like. When you work with like a subcontractor or partner organization on your work. You'll want to make sure that they're explicit, that we have signatures on everything, that everything's above board, that everything clearly labeled. So when it comes time to work with that contractor or evaluate that contractor's performance or progress, you can refer to these documents and be very clear on what your relationship should look like. Similarly here on the next slide, this is more formalized. So this is between overall funder and an organization. But this outline, has all the same pieces. They just look different, right? So the scope of work is going to be between 2 certain organizations. It's going to have a period of time for performance. You're going to agree to several items that detail exactly what they will be. You're going to provide a certain number of trainings, a certain number of one-to-one sessions or hours towards those sessions. You'll develop a certain number of toolkits to be delivered in some manner, in this case electronically. And then you have your various rates of pay. And in this case, we showcased, a total contract not to exceed. Sometimes you'll have both ways you get paid and then a total amount that they come to. And at the very bottom, everyone signs and agrees and is very happy with these scopes. So these are just 2 kind of examples of scopes of work. They're both more contractual in nature, but that's generally what scopes of work are going to look like for you. We can. So let's go ahead and we can land there for just a second or 2 and just see. I might have talked a little fast and just see any questions. Any thoughts on scope creation, avoiding scope creep, all related to scopes of work.
So I have some thoughts to add here as I've seen different scopes of work, and it's a little bit of a balancing act. So, when folks are thinking about what they're going to do on the project, there's usually like a proposal to a funder, and that could be a grant or a contract or something. And that proposal is much more wordy than these scopes of work that we reviewed. And so trying to think of how to condense everything that you've done into a succinct scope of work could be challenging. Also, there's always a time gap between the date of when you propose something and when it actually may get awarded. And that could be several months to even a year or more. So as you think about your scope of work, think about the real time, think about the budget available, and revisit this. It may not make sense to stay with what you proposed during your grant because things may have changed. For example, COVID happened. Nobody anticipated COVID would take as long as it did and the impact it would have. But if you were proposing a grant before you knew about COVID and then got the funds when COVID happened, you might have to renegotiate and rethink of your scope of work and your deliverables to the funder. So keep that in mind. The funder is, the scopes of work are two-party, standards, so to speak, and keep it open, and talk about what you can or can't do or how things have changed and how you might need to realign the budget. Don't agree to what you have thought about previously because it might be hard for you to achieve those goals. And Zach did a great job of presenting, specificity in naming your goals and the tasks that you want to complete. But as you think of a scope of work, you could be overly detailed in your goals. And so back to the example that Zach had with how many people we're going to get through this literacy program and how many surveys we're going to distribute, you could over commit to that. And you could say, we're going to have 4 surveys distributed on a Tuesday to, people that are in the classroom, and they're going to take the survey between, 11 a.m. and noon. And, pretty soon it's going to be hard to meet those standards because you've been so specific that if you stray from that scope of work, the funder might say, well, how do you know you've actually did everything in here? So don't write yourself into a corner being so specific that you can't meet the deliverable, but don't be as vague where it's just wide open and we don't even know how you can track your impact in the work. And that could be a good segue when we talk about evaluating data and how do you track outcomes and impact. And there's several other ways to think about scopes of work. Again, keep an open mind with your funder, help negotiate what's realistic, and what you can both agree to in the time period that you have to do the work. So thanks. Just a few thoughts from what I've seen in different scenarios.
Yeah. Thank you, Angela. All right, with that, we'll jump over and start talking a little bit about evaluation plans and tracking data. And so just at the top here, like with scopes of work, we talked a brief moment on reporting requirements. And not all grants, not all contracts are going to have deep reporting requirements. Yes, maybe at the government or state level, usually they want to know exactly what you did and why. But there are grants and opportunities out there that might just ask for simple narrative reports on how did you spend your money, especially when you're talking maybe foundational or private donation or giving. They might not have as many requirements towards really critical evaluation and data tracking. With that said, though, it's part of building as you're looking to build proposals and develop new plans and ideas to go after funding, having tangible data and related to your communities and your work and the people you serve can be very beneficial to painting a picture of your need and helping funders understand why you're asking for money. There's a lot to it that goes into the actual writing and writing good, convincing words and beautiful language and having a great plan, but that can only take you so far. And if you have good data to back up some of the claims or some of what you plan to do, or really showcase how you've made an impact within your communities and within your work, it goes much further. So as we're going through this, keep in mind, this might not be related necessarily only to the tracking or reporting as related to scope of work, although that's how we're going to talk about it a little bit. This can also be more just generally for your organization, that it can be a good practice to think about how we track our community impacts so that we can make a convincing case for ourselves as we move forward in the funding world, right? Um, so let's start with the importance of data, right? So data drives decisions, and it's absolutely important that you're going to track this for your project or program. It can show you the impact and help you strategically make decisions, whether you're going to stay the course or maybe you'll make some changes or make some improvements. You might demonstrate the benefit. It helps you uh, improve the lives of those around you. I showcase how you're meeting the needs of your community, or even showcasing new needs that maybe hadn't been as emergent as you had thought. And then, of course, this all can help as you come down to having your budget and meeting your service goals as related to grants and reporting and service contracts. Um, so defining data. So good data tracking starts with really defining what we're looking at here. So you want to define what units of information you're going to collect through your observation. What are your metrics? What are your measurements? How are you evaluating this? What are the statistics? And both qualitative and quantitative. So going through, you want to understand what are you collecting and what's most beneficial to you. So as you're crafting your data and analysis plan, how are you gonna showcase what you're doing? Generally speaking, and I'm talking about maybe through the lens more specifically of maybe state contracts or RFPs or service development, you're gonna want to both track your specific demographic work, so who you're working with, what their cultural backgrounds are, how what their assessed need is for whatever your service is going to be. Maybe financial literacy, or maybe housing and homelessness, right? And you'll track specifically that. Secondarily, you might track some quality, and those are all going to be more quantitative. They're going to be specific numbers, specific people. For example, on financial literacy, they might ask that you show how those lives have improved quantitatively, so numbers on paper. But it's always good to track qualitative, which is going to speak somewhat to more impact. How people feel, or do they feel more comfortable? Are they happier? Are they thriving? Are they, are people, or even we've definitely had some fantastic work with some clients we've done where they just get good quotes from their clients who came to these events and learned all these new things and just want to share the good word. And these are all qualitative measures, though, of how is our community feeling about our work? Are we doing a good job? And this can all help shape both the success of your given project or program, but overall your impact on your community. So how does data inform grant applications? So data can help people better understand the health and needs in your neighborhoods and communities. It's going to be important as you're writing grant applications. You might be providing data on the people you serve in the community, your service area. You can be asked to provide data on the programs you're working on, especially if you're asking for funding. As we mentioned earlier, it can really help shape the ask and the need. And when funders are looking at proposals or reviewing assessments, it can help them really identify how much resource needs to get deployed, and helps them connect better the dollars and cents that can sometimes be a little a little more transactional or robotic, I suppose, rather than just feeling good about the things they're doing. So how do we monitor and evaluation plans? So what do we need to measure? So your needs assessments should always include a who, what, when, and how much. Looking through your impacts and outcomes. And as we talked about earlier in scope development, right, we want to think about SMART objectives. In the same way that we strategic plan and budget and scope development and everything else, right? What are the specific, measurable, achievable, and realistic data evaluations, right? And I'll bounce this over to Angela really quick just to talk a little bit more on the monitoring and evaluation plans.
Yes, so here I think as you are tracking your impact, it's important to figure out how you're tracking this methods, and we'll talk about that in a future slides, and how you measure. And so going beyond like SMART objectives that we kind of outlined before, it's often important to think about inclusion and equity, and that's led to a little bit of expansion from SMART goals to SMARTY goals or SMARTY objectives. And here, and we'll send out these slides and recording, but is an example from the Centers for Disease Control and how they've kind of shaped something from a SMART objective to a SMARTY objective. And here they're talking about something, we hope nobody gets ever, but the rate of breast cancer and how women might be dying from breast cancer over 40 by June 2022. So they're trying to decrease the rate of breast cancer death among women from 48 to 38, so 2 points by June 2022. And that's very amazing. I hope they can do it. But as we look at this in a SMARTY goal or objective lens, who are they decreasing the rate of breast cancer mortality, so breast cancer death? It says decrease the rate of breast cancer mortality from 50 to 45 among African American women by June 2022. So now I'm really learning who is trying to receive the benefit of this reduction of breast cancer mortality, and it's specifically African American women. So that is great, and that is something to think about in your writing. So not only specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound goals, but also inclusion and equity, which I think many of the groups on this today's workshop are really dealing with. So thanks, Zach. Next slide. So here I'll give Zach a break to get a little bit of water here. So gathering data, it kind of depends on how you're tracking the data. And we talked about qualitative and quantitative methods. So, what people think and feel versus things that you can count with numbers. So, surveys, people do have survey fatigue, but oftentimes it's great to get them to write something down or click a button or choose an option. So surveys are often frequently used, and that could be one of your data collection methods of how you're going to understand what people are thinking. This could be a qualitative/quantitative approach because you're asking people what they think or feel, but you're also going to count their responses, right? So that's a great method to think about. Interviews. So interviews might take a little bit longer. You would have to define who you're talking to and the questions that you're asking them, and hopefully asking whoever you're talking to the same question if you're talking to more than one people, so you have consistent responses to track. But interviews are a great way to talk about that, again, that qualitative lens and how people might think or feel or perceive a certain issue. Focus groups, again, similar to surveys and interviews, but in a group setting, or they might be called convenings or gatherings, but ways to get people to think and express their feelings about something. If you think of like maybe Flaming Hot Cheetos, right? Before they distributed that product and came up with the idea, they had focus groups and people tried it and they gave them feedback. Was it spicy? Was it not spicy enough? Would I buy this in the store, right? So think of focus groups as a way to get data, but it might not give you all the data you need, and it depends on the opinions of the group of the day. Also, you might be looking at data from certain resources and tools, and you might be able to get it from existing spreadsheets of people that have tracked similar data before. You might have a project management system or tool to help you track your data. So Smartsheet, as a lot of groups use that. Sometimes with county or city funded projects, if you're dealing with homeless, there's a homeless management information system. HIMAS data is required. You might be gathering data or looking for data that's publicly available from the census or other sites. You might be coming across other publications or things in writing. Maybe it's the News Tribune, maybe it's an article in a journal, or maybe it's a report, and trying to gather like, who can tell me more about this issue that I'm trying to track? Social demographic population data. This can be, again, from the census or something that you may have observed in your work, like who are you serving, what are the demographics, age, race, ethnicity, what's the makeup of the group you're working with, and also reports. So gathering data, though, you should think about it not after you get the money, but when you write the proposal. And so you should be thinking of how you're going to track data. And data should be tracked from the beginning and not necessarily at the end. And so what we encourage groups to do is think about when you start a project, how are you gathering this baseline, what we call baseline, starter data. So if you're working on a project and you have to serve, let's say you're going to feed 50 kids lunch at the school district, you want to write that down in the beginning. Like, I'm going to feed 50 kids in the school district, right? And I'm going to feed them lunch every day for 3 months. And that's where we're talking about back to the, goes into your scope of work. It goes back into how you're tracking data. That's your starting point. And then you can create your tracking tools based on that. And you would be tracking meals served, days per week, children eating those meals. Maybe you're making sack lunches, right? And you're going to track that over time. And if this is a 3-month project, great. How many meals did you serve over those 3 months is a great outcome to track. And you would be tracking that hopefully daily or weekly. You don't want to track that at the end of the 3 months and be like, gosh, I think we might have served those. Was the cook even in that Tuesday? Did I have, paper bags for that brown bag lunch? Was the school open? Was it a holiday? With the teachers in service, right? You don't want to go back and try to remember if you served that food. You want to be tracking it timely. So think about that as you're gathering your data. And then at the end, when you're doing a report or talking to the funder or maybe talking to a donor, you're going to say, we had this amazing 3-month program. We fed 50 kids at this school district in a high need neighborhood, an average of at least one hot meal a day. And tell you what, you can even talk about how maybe the attendance went up at school. Maybe because they had full bellies that had one hot meal a day, maybe school got a little bit better for them. And those things might not be exactly the result of your project, but you can kind of infer, hey, food in the belly helped these kids thrive more. And this is what we're seeing. So if you can give us money to feed these kids for 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, we can really track more of these outcomes and track how the children thrive. And then you're going to be tracking maybe more qualitative data, like, are the children, better attendance? You think they did, but do they have better attendance? Are they getting their homework done? Are more kids participating? Can you expand to other schools? So again, back to when Zach said data drives decisions, this is how you track the data to drive those decisions. If you just say, we're good at managing money, give us money to feed these kids, it may not be the best outcome after you wrap up your project. So as you can see, I'm very excited about gathering data, but just to give you some things to think about as you go through the process.
Thank you. Perfect. I was able to get water. Thank you. So like Angela said, kind of this slide piggybacking on some of that, tracking data and metrics. As you're forming your scopes of work, as you're forming your proposals and plans, keeping in mind how you're planning ahead for how you're going to be tracking your data and your metrics. So these are some questions to think about, some ideas. As we said, what do you want to track? What do your funders want to track? What do your funders want to see? Some of this, what do funders want to see? They might not tell you, especially I'll speak from our experience. Funders aren't always going to tell you exactly what they want to see as outcomes. They might have an idea around reducing incidents of homelessness or having their money well spent or right. But going a little further and reading through the RFP or the grant and kind of aligning your program objectives with the overall objective of that grant program, right? Especially if it's something like sub-granting program, right? Like the federal government has given money for this overall thing across the nation, and Washington or Pierce County or City of Tacoma has taken some of that to kind of tool for themselves, and passing that on to you. You want to kind of track up and down the line on what's the bigger picture and how do I fit in. So as you're considering your data and tracking plans, right, kind of fitting all those pieces together so that when it does come time to give your, interim reporting or your final reporting, or even if you don't have a report, but you do want to speak more to the need of this project, right? You'll be able to view it from a number of different angles, right? Not tracking only one thing. The number of people served a hot lunch, right? That might not be enough information, even if that's all the funder wants to see, or if the only goal was to give a certain number of hot lunches for in a certain period of time. That may not really track the full need scope, and really identify some root causes and root problems, and more address the growing capacity for what your project may or may not need. So developing kind of uh, uh, unique's not the word I'm looking for, I'm sorry, but your own method of tracking and developing and bringing in all the data you would like to see about these resources, so you can better articulate and better explain and better present all that before whoever, a funder or even just donors, right? um so obviously there's going to be some amount of funder provider data systems. Sometimes some funders will even give you they want a certain report done in a certain way, so they'll just give you a tracking sheet with 3 or 4 numbers on it that you just fill out. But you can but keep things on your own as well. You're going to want to keep both an internal process, just like with grants and contract accounting. There's also going to be generally audits on your data. So if you're reporting things out to your funders, or reporting out to donors, or anyone interested, there can be a requirement that you not only for, like a desk audit or something, not only might they audit finances related to whatever this program or product was, but if they have questions or concerns about your metrics you're reporting, then you may have to have your data audited as well. So just like in a good grant accounting system, you really need to develop a solid basis for your data, and be able to clearly and articulately explain where this data is coming from, how you got it, how you kept it, safe or compliant or clear, how you tracked it, how you sorted it, what these numbers mean, so that when you relate it to your reports, it's a clear and easy picture for an auditor who views things as like an outside perspective. Like anyone coming into this should be able to tell how you got to these numbers, and if it's obfuscated or unclear or difficult, then the audit comes into question. And especially if your numbers don't match, then we have a huge problem, right? So you'll want to make sure that both quantitative and qualitative, so quantitative being numbers and measurements, and qualitative being perception, feelings, opinions, right? Keep all of that somewhere, and keep a good system, develop a good system early on in your planning process for this, right? And then also being able to track your outputs and your outcomes, right? So not only what were the direct items or the number of things you did, but again, in that quantitative way, but also your outcomes, being able to show your impact, your changes, benefits, and being able to describe those. So finally, kind of the next step. So that was about, a lot about how we can use data and considerations for how we track the data. But kind of the final piece, and like we said, not every single grant is going to ask for this, but how do you analyze, interpret, and report your data? So being able to take the time to sit down either with your teams or yourself, or a consultant, or however that's going to work. But what is the data telling you? How does it demonstrate your project's impact? The second level review or the audit, verifying the accuracy of data, and then tracking and reporting the results to the funder, relevant partners, collaborators, so that you can really understand and be able to explain everything that's happening. What are you seeing here? Serving a 50% of your community, what does that mean, right? What did they need? How's it impacting them? How's it improving their lives? We do with a number of our projects, whether they've necessarily been asked for or not sometimes. We've done after action reports or closeout reports. And so although we have obviously a number of data that we've been asked to track or report on throughout the time, we've also used opportunities to kind of showcase greater need, or explain, some of the things we are seeing as either contractors or partners, and being able to pull all this data together and then write, a few pages on, a white paper on what we've seen and experienced through that project. It can help your organization as well as your funders in a number of ways. We love lessons learned. So when we close out a project, part of this being the data and tracking, we always do a lessons learned. So what went well, what maybe didn't go as well, what are some takeaways, how can we analyze the actions and the outcomes to say, how can we be better, or what new items came, or what new needs did we find through our work? Because not everything is going to be, not for us in our experience, not everything's been up front. We know what we were aiming to do, and what we did might be completely different. And sometimes that's great, and sometimes that's a thing for us to all take away and learn from. So in your project closeout, in the final steps of your data analytics, you're going to want to spend some time really kind of pulling away these lessons learned, and spend time, even if you don't write the whole white paper, if you don't write the full 5 pages and send it to your funder to say, we did all this work and look how much more there is to do, or something, right? It can be still good for you as a practice internally, as you look to be growing and changing and demonstrating what you need, and working through your communities, to spend time in that space, and spend some time, thought and planning, and maybe sitting down for a strategic planning or a project closeout meeting where you all just talk about this, right? You just think about it, and look at what it is, ask yourselves some of these questions, and maybe come to something new or different through that, right? Let's see. And I think, well, we'll land there for just a second, because that's actually going to be the end of this, portion. So maybe just I'll ask early, any questions, thoughts, considerations, challenges you're facing that we'd love to talk about, or you're willing to share, in this or other topics, I suppose.
Yeah, I think Zach, just to add again about data. So you don't have to be a statistician or really good at math to be able to track data. And as we talk about this, being intentional on what you're tracking when, and being consistent, is really going to help you. And as we talk about like data drives decisions, funders want to know the impact of the work, and they want to know, if I give you these types of dollars, what degree of change are you going to see? And so being able to track data and being able to tell a story with that data is going to help you be very successful at getting additional funds, or shifting how you deliver your programming. Maybe what once worked last year isn't working this year. I mean, you have to kind of pivot. And we saw that with COVID, right? A lot of groups had to pivot. And maybe you learned something, and maybe what you thought was good with the community isn't good with the community, and they had some ideas, and that participant feedback kind of influenced how you track your data and how you deliver your programs. And so think of data tracking as somewhat of like a grocery list that you take to the the grocery store. And if you are like me sometimes, that you just love to wander the aisles, you may forget why you went to the store in the first place. Might have been milk, and you came home with everything but the milk, right? Because you were like, wow, look at all the wonderful things in the store. So keep that in mind as you're tracking data. That should tie back to your scope of work and what you're really trying to learn from this project. And it can help inform future funding opportunities. And we have heard that data tracking is a pain point. So, a simple Excel spreadsheet is great. A simple, anything that can help you do numbers, but also where you can type words in, is a good tool. A Google form or a Google survey might also be a good way to capture data. You don't need to spend a lot of money in a data tracking system necessarily, but you need to be consistent on what you're entering and how you're tracking the information. So just some thoughts here for you and how you go about this topic.
Thank you. Perfect. Well, with that, looks like we're probably wrapping up a bit early. So, but let me just put a quick plug in for our next event is April 23rd. This is going to be an in-person event, 1:30 to 3:30. It's a learning forum conversation at the Rise Center. The learning forum's a little less of uh, workshop and more of a chance for us to all come together, learn together, seek feedback from the community, understand what challenges you're facing, hear from invited speakers, or be together in community. One of the feedback we've heard from a number of folks is that it's nice to be able to get together and see that they're not the only ones that are facing challenges in this nonprofit community. So love you to attend, have you there. It'll be a good time. Also, you can sign up for technical assistance sessions at our English and Spanish links here. I'm also going to drop in the chat. As I said earlier, we have plenty of time and availability to do any general inquiry. General inquiry can be anything you want. So it's a 30-minute session. Come in, talk to us, tell us what you need, and let's find a way that we can resource those things together. We do have technical assistance available throughout the year with a variety of subject matter experts in accounting, donations, grant writing, grant seeking, data management, project planning and management. So, anything you're worried about, feel free to talk to us. These sessions are completely free to you. It's all supported by this amazing work with Neighborhood Community Service at Tacoma Crates. So please feel free, sign up, let us know how we can help. Some free resources for you. And again, we'll be sending these out, so these links will all be available to you. But Clark Nuber has provided some nonprofit training resources for over 70 years. They provided these sophisticated accounting consulting services to clients across the Pacific Northwest. They have over 300 professionals bringing world-class expertise to their client implement strategies for financial health, management, and growth. They have an extensive library of webinars, and they're available free to any nonprofit organizations as part of the Tacoma Capacity Building Project. So there is a little sign up that you'll have to do to stay informed of the industry and subscribe. But once you do, you'll get access to all these amazing resources through them. And I asked for questions earlier, but of course, if there are more questions, feel free to let us know. But with that, I just want to acknowledge and thank you so much for all being here. I know you're all doing amazing work, and it's busy taking time out of your days to sit in on these presentations. But yeah, we'd love to talk with you and meet with you. I know, like I said, it can take time out of these busy days. You guys are all doing the fantastic work in the community, and asking you guys to come in the middle of your day, sometimes on your lunch, to do these can be a lot. But we really appreciate y'all. We're here, and we're in your corner. We're on your team. Please, if you need anything, always feel free to let us know.